Welcome to Pivotal People. Today we're going to be speaking to Barrie Davison. Barrie is a Senior Director and National Sector Head for NatWest Bank. Hi, welcome Barrie to Pivotal People, and it's really, really good of you to come and see us today. What I want to talk to you about is, first of all, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now at NatWest.
So the role that I do now is very, very broad. In fact, I think most of our bankers' roles now are broader than they've ever been before. So I'm National Sector Head. I cover healthcare, education, local authorities and charities, where cumulatively we have around about 21 billion of exposure. Prior to this job, I was the head of healthcare, but 2 years ago we undertook a strategic review and we realised that actually a lot of the sectors operated in very distinct ecosystems. And in fact, the lines between those sectors were really starting to blur. So if you look at healthcare, it has a lot of interface with educational institutions and certainly local authorities as well. And indeed, charities, you look at our charity book, a lot of them are either healthcare or education focused. So it just made sense, given the conversations we were having, to put them all together and have them looked after by one person.
Mm-hmm. And that's you.
And that's me, yeah.
Okay. Tell me about your journey to where you are now. So take yourself back to the boy and what got you to where you are. Let's talk us through your journey.
Wow, very much came from a working class family. My dad was a bank manager at NatWest for the majority of his career. However, he finished school when he was 18 and actually went down the mines.
Wow.
So he was a coal miner for many, many years, mainly to support his family. His brother had an accident when they were very, very young and actually stepped on an old World War II mine, which ended up kind of incapacitating him. So my dad had to go to work. He tells the stories of being down the mines for 12 hours in these tiny little tunnels where you're literally picking at the coal face for 12 hours solid. And he did that. He would have done that, to be honest, all of his life until, unfortunately, he saw one of his best friends die down the mines, and that's when he decided to transition, and he became a banker.
How on earth do you transition from being a miner to being a bank manager?
I mean, after my dad saw his best friend die, I mean, it was a pretty horrific accident. I think it was, my dad realised that there was more to life, and he applied for a role as a clerk, so he got the most junior role. And he always tells a story about 2 weeks in the chief executive of the then NatWest Bank coming into the office and my dad asking him the question, how do you get on in this organisation? And from that point forward, my dad had a relationship with the chief executive and he ended up effectively moving around every year for different jobs. So he started off as a clerk and eventually when he retired, he was the head of credit in Manchester. So, quite a journey, but that was really inspiring to me to kind of hear that story. I'm like, well, if my dad can go from that to being, a successful banker, then there's hope for us all.
Absolutely. So you went off to university and studied psychology.
Yes.
As we always say, psychology is one of those things that benefits every career. And what happened next? So you did your psychology degree.
Yeah, I did my psychology degree, and part of the specialisms in the final year were child psychology and dementia. So I spent a lot of time with Alzheimer's patients. I also spent a lot of time with children. And I realised through that actually you get a real sense of achievement and kind of it gives you a real sense of purpose. So I really wanted to go into clinical psychology. However, back in 1997, there wasn't many jobs in clinical psychology. In fact, there were a handful in the UK. In order to do that, it would have meant me moving to the US, which I wasn't quite ready for. And so I applied, like a lot of people do, for the graduate training schemes. Yeah. I got onto the one with Coopers and Lybrand and trained as an accountant for a couple of years before then transitioning onto the NatWest graduate scheme, which I did for 2 or 3 years as well. So that was my journey into the bank.
So you had that in your mind, that the banking was there in your mind right from the beginning?
Not really, no. I mean, it was, like I say, it was opportunistic because, at the end of the day, you have bills to pay. And whilst I had a passion for psychology and a particular interest in clinical psychology, I knew that with the hard economic reality was I needed a paycheck. And actually, accountancy and banking at the time were the highest paid jobs. I remember going into Coopers and I was paid £10,000 a year, and I thought I was, rich beyond belief.
Yeah.
And then I actually got a £2,000 pay rise to go to NatWest. So,
Oh, brilliant! Yeah.
but no, it was never in my mind. It was purely opportunistic. But I realised once I got into NatWest or RBS at the time, how broad an organisation it was. And I was lucky enough to kind of work on the project team that integrated RBS with NatWest. So RBS had been a relatively small bank that had really struggled to compete, and then we took over NatWest, and all of a sudden the regulatory constraints changed. The deals that we were winning were far larger than I'd ever seen before. We had one individual who could sign off up to £1 billion of exposure, which I just thought was mind-blowing. So kind of going in and acting as part of that integration team really helped open my eyes to how broad the bank was.
So going forward, you've worked your way up to the position you are now. What about your future? What's your future career looking like?
It's a really good question, and I've spent some time with my leadership team kind of discussing kind of next roles and responsibilities. For me, the people element is really important. I see myself as probably doing another maybe 10 years in kind of the banking industry in a kind of people leadership role. But then fundamentally beyond that, once, I don't have the financial obligations of putting children through school and university, I would like to go back to the kind of my psychology roots, which is kind of, really my key driver. So I've already kind of looked into becoming a school counsellor, so doing counselling work with children. I have a couple of children that I do some work with who have some learning disabilities, and just the sense of enjoyment and purpose that gives you, if I can replicate that on a wider scale, I think for me anyway would give me a real sense of purpose.
Yeah, I think this always proves to me that those people that are working in healthcare in your industry have got that passion behind them and that interest in what we do, and to do it well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you have to. I mean, I spend a lot of my time in care homes, in nursing homes, in specialist care settings, and the people that work in these environments, it's 24/7. It's not like my job where I go home in the evening and I can switch off completely. You never switch off from that. No. And I personally like that, but I know for a lot of people they want to have that clear delineation between work and personal life, and they don't want to carry work into their personal life, which you just can't do in healthcare.
You can't. You can ask my children and they'll tell you that Daddy brought them up. Because Mummy was always working. Right. Healthcare is a career that takes over. It takes over your life completely. So what do you feel about the future of healthcare? You see it from a different angle to how I see it. I'm in care homes all the time, and I'm seeing it from the issues with CQC and the issues with staffing and the same old stuff that we're trying to sort out and sort of support people with. What about you from the banking side of it? How do you see the future?
So I would contextualise our stance as broadly optimistic. I think the kind of Labour government and some of the conversations we had with some of the shadow ministers at the time shone a light on, actually, they understood that there was issues to be dealt with. Now, I accept the fiscal constraints that the government's in right now doesn't make that easy. But fundamentally, if you look at the NHS and you look at social care and you look at around the periphery at some of the other primary care and life sciences businesses, and indeed the fact that you've got 50% of university spin-outs are now health tech related, I think I'm optimistic, because I think technology has a real role to play in actually sustaining people in a healthier lifestyle. And I think, when you look at the NHS, and, we kind of have a lot of interaction with the NHS through our global banking markets division, and there's a lot of complexity in there, which I kind of liken to where NatWest was maybe 15 years ago. Actually, if you simplified the model of the NHS and had closer, and it's a bit of a cliche, people talk about closer interaction between social care and the NHS. I think you can have better integration between the two. But in order to do that, you need to simplify first. You've really got to simplify the NHS, because that's never going to happen. I look at some of the conversations that go on around the country in different ICBs and ICSs, and it's not functional with a view to sustaining and improving people's lifestyles. So I think first and foremost, it's simplification of the NHS, which will save money, and then kind of integration with social care. But then you've got this time period where actually, you know, in order to simplify the NHS, it is a biggest employer in the world. It's not going to happen overnight. So I think a lot of the round tables that we do centre on, well, what conversations can we have now to help unlock some of that, so that, you know, there is better interaction and kind of shared responsibilities between the two.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And that's, you know, that's something, we are from different ends of the healthcare industry, I suppose, but both going in the right direction by the sound of it.
Yeah, like I think healthcare, as well as education, are the cornerstones of any successful society. Yeah. And, you know, when you look at the kind of the mega trends, you know, you do have people living longer, healthier lifestyles. Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, and some of the work we've been doing with the Royal Foundation on early years, you've actually got collapsing birth rates, which, you know, economically longer term is a real issue, not just for us, but globally, because that's just not sustainable. I think they've already been able to predict the point in time when the last person in Japan will be alive, based on the fact that they're now selling more adult nappies than what they are children's nappies. So you've actually got this real shrinkage in the population, which if replicated globally, you know, is a real issue for us as a human race.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. Thank you, Barrie, for joining us. Thank you for coming. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.